Hello and welcome to ShePack. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Sehgal, Director of Demand Generation at FullStory. And in today's episode, we're going to discuss Uncharted Journeys, Resilience Redefined. Sarah, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you for having me. And just say, I'm so excited that this kind of podcast is out there and that you're driving this forward. It's so unique and refreshing to have something that's about more of like the lives in the background rather than just the day-to-day data and stuff. So congrats. That's amazing.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. You know, people want to hear stories, and they don't want to hear just, like cookie cutter stories. They want to hear vulnerable stories. And like I said, I just appreciate you being willing to come on and share that, because I do think that stories have impacts in people's lives. I know it has for me personally. So I'm super stoked to share your story. So tell us, what have you been up to at FullStory as the Director of Demand Gen?
Yeah. So I'll say right now we're right in the midst of, we just kicked off Q3. So all things reporting and setting up new campaigns and, trying all the things to optimize and do what all other marketers are doing right now, driving revenue, driving a good customer experience. But I'll share that I've been here for about 2.5 years and had an interesting start. I actually started on the ABM side of the house and then moved over to Demand Gen, which means about 1 million different things wherever you go. But here, it's my team manages all things when it comes to performance, marketing ops, our lead life cycle, all that good stuff, and work to support the entire organization. So I have a tiny but mighty team of 4 badass women who they truly support our entire org with driving the marketing funnel and really driving good experiences.
Yeah, it's so interesting to be part of marketing, I feel like right now, with like cost efficiency talks and, looking at performance and cash burn rates. So it's exciting time to be in marketing. You also had mentioned before the Director of Demand Gen role, you were doing ABX. But what were you doing before ABX and going into leading Demand Gen?
Yeah, so I've always been in the marketing sales space for about a decade, a little over a decade now. I started out with sales and started that during college. I found a sales job that was selling both websites and what some viewers or listeners may have never used before are phone book ads. So I was selling yellow pages and websites at the same time of, hey, here's a phone book ad and you want a website? Have you ever thought of SEO? So that was really a unique experience and kind of throttled me face first into the world of digital marketing and how that works with businesses, and really drove my interest and passion. I was like, oh, I really like this. I think this is where things are going. And so I've really been in the digital marketing space, particularly in that for B2B SaaS. So I moved from sales, moved over to more of the SaaS world, doing customer success. I've done marketing, sales, and marketing's definitely my favorite of all the functions. But I really love, and I would share even with anyone else, if you have the opportunity to check out other roles, or even just to, whether it's shadowing or anything, do it. Because when we think go to market, which is another buzzword right now, but a lot of these teams, you really don't know what they're doing in the trenches, and you don't have that empathy unless you've done that. So I feel really fortunate, even though I've bounced around, it's helped me really build better relationships with the basis of empathy with some of my counterparts in CS and sales. So yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like that level of empathy, it's really hard. You always hear about that relationship between sales and marketing and how they don't get along, or, sometimes it can be difficult. And I do think it's that street cred of having a sales background. Now, it's not completely necessary, I feel like, but I do think to understand before we want to throw over a lead or qualified accounts, you had mentioned ABX. I think it's helpful to understand pay is at risk. I know what that feels like. So how would I approach certain things? And I think to the other piece that you said, I love, just embracing the roles that you're in, because I feel like you start checking off that box and you get more just awareness of all the different aspects of marketing, but then how you start to generate revenue and even the expansion side of it. So I love that. Be great at what you're given is what I get from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about your background, growing up and how this has really impacted and developed who you are today.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. It's
Let's
really
go.
interesting when I think about where I grew up and what I was exposed to and things like that. Digital marketing and the idea of marketing, what the heck was SaaS? I had no idea what any of that was, even up until early college. So had no exposure to that. So it's been an interesting ride to get there. But I grew up I'm from North Carolina, or was born in Texas, but my parents split when I was pretty young and grew up in North Carolina with my mom's side of the family. And I'm half Native American. So if you're not familiar with the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, shout out Lumbee tribe, please go look it up. The largest tribe, one of the largest tribes on the East Coast, but I grew up in really the hub of our tribe. So we're not on a reservation, but even my high school was 80-something% Native American. So that rural kind of more like there are some key family values and key just, like the things that you grow up with, like how close family is, how close you are to your neighbors and the sense of community. Really grew up with that, but in an area that was one of the poorest areas in the United States. I think the county ranked, it's like in the bottom 20 or 30 counties in terms of income per capita. So it was a little bit of a unique perspective or unique, upbringing, especially compared to peers that I'm with today. It's very different. I don't have some of those kind of, oh yeah, we were, like picket fence and, went to a private school. I was on subsidized lunch and it was just a lot different. I'll share that one of the key drivers of me growing up was my mom, who, unfortunately she passed away last year, but she was, and I'm sure it still is, but definitely my biggest fan. She pushed me and was always at everything and pushed really and helped to create a sense of drive for me. On the other side of that, she had a lot of trauma in her life from early childhood and things and battled mental health issues and addiction. So kind of grew up with this sense of a little bit of a paradoxical upbringing where you have a lot of these great things of like academia, I'm doing great in school, and a parent who pushes you, but also being exposed to addiction and poverty and a lot of that, that it really created this drive of like, I don't want this for me, to really drive into, at the time it was academics and trying to be the top of the class. But then later that's like really pushed me to continue to have that competitive drive now.
Well, one, I'm so sorry to hear about your mom. It sounds like I like to refer to my mom as Shira, the warrior princess, and it sounds like your mom was the same and had this like huge positive influence in your life. What else do you feel motivated you to strive for that academic success, despite all the circumstances that you had just mentioned around you?
Yeah, I think there's two things, and my answer to this probably would have been different a month ago before I started going to therapy. I've recently started going to therapy, and it's opened my eyes to a number of things from childhood. But two things. One that's not different is like competitive drive. I think that there are some things that are innate in us, and when you can try to build it and create it, I think that's just some things that you just come with who you are. And I've been competitive since I was a little kid. I can remember playing soccer, which I hated, but I was like, there's no way I'm going to be the slowest person on the team. And I just have always had that competitive drive. I want to be the best, sometimes to a fault, but that's always been there. The other piece, especially with academics, that I recently came more to light is the potential of that, or kind of looking through that through a lens of as a coping mechanism. So again, like a lot of stuff was going on at home. I grew up in an area, like I said, I'm half Native American, but I'm half white. And I kind of had this sense of like, where do I belong? Because I didn't look like a lot of my peers, but it also was different than like when I would go see my dad and who was in Texas. So my academics and being able to see like, hey, if I put this effort in, it's a very clear, kind of not necessarily an experiment, but it's this process of if I put the effort in, I'm going to get the success. And then that drives, like I get the positive benefit from that. And I kind of think that was a coping mechanism for everything around me till I'm like, you know what, let me just be all into this. And that's that at that age, I think that laid the foundation for that drive with like not just academics, but that transitions into career and motherhood and all these other things that, hey, I want to like have that success. I have to put all this effort in to do it, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when you were talking about the soccer piece of it. It's like you got that competitive edge and it's like, but gosh, there's so much cardio. It's like the cardio of it, but you got to keep up. But it is part of that like competitive edge where you want to continue to stay ahead and continue to drive. Now tell me, like, so throughout school, like as you started to plan out, because like you say, you put in all this effort and you know that it's going to drive to a successful outcome. So it's like planning this trajectory. How did you start to think through that? So it sounds like you did very well in sports and academia. How did that start to progress in terms of where you started to see yourself in terms of like applying for schools?
Yeah, I will say there was a very clear path of what was expected, both of what was expected of me and what I expected to happen. I was putting all this work in and had all the right grades. I was involved in all the sports and all the extracurriculars, class president, all this stuff. My resume it was like perfection for college, right? So my plan at the time was, okay, I'm going to go into a good college, ideally an Ivy League college. I'm going to do pre-med. I want to be an oncologist. I had my stepmother and stepmother I was very close to in high school, who passed away from cancer. And I kind of like grabbed onto that of like, yes, I want to be an oncologist because I could see like the only thought that I had of medical, like of being able to make a difference in the world and make money is medical. So I was like, oh, that's the only option there is. So that was the goal. That was the plan up until the winter break of my senior year, where over winter break, I found out I was pregnant. And that plan completely got obliterated in literally just a matter of seconds in my mind, because I was like, there's no way any of this will happen. So that was, as I talked a little bit before, but that was it was really a tough time to think, oh gosh, I've created this mechanism, this coping mechanism, this idea of success. I have this plan. Now what's going to happen? And that was kind of the time in my life where it really was, and I think of a turning point of like becoming who I am today, but of thinking, oh gosh, I don't know what am I going to do? And it just drove a ton of pain and just even trauma at that time. If I look back, it was the worst time of my life to think, gosh, my whole world is now shattered. But now looking back, you can obviously see it's completely different.
Yeah, no, well, and I'm sure too, I mean, you have all these things, you're on this amazing trajectory and then, life happens. I think that we get so hard on ourselves. And hindsight, life happens and it starts to build you. But that moment that you found out you were pregnant, how did you start to process the news? I mean, obviously you started to share, it's just that kind of like that, ugh. But tell us more about how you started to process.
Even when I try to look back at that time, I'm like, what the heck did I do to process this? I don't think I was 8. I just turned 18. And around the same time, I'll never forget, it was right when, acceptance letters were starting to come in. And I had a pre-acceptance from Dartmouth, which was like one of the top schools I wanted to go to. And right around the same time, we finding out my number one school was Duke. And at that time, when you're in high school, that's your big focus. That's everyone's big focus is college. Let me say not everyone, most people's big focus is college. And that was the start. I'm like, gosh, if I get into Duke University, that's it. That's going to change my whole life. And it was around the same time I got that acceptance letter. So that processing, there was a lot of internal conflict and rage and anger and confusion, like almost all of the negative thoughts you can think and emotions, like those were there because I didn't have a plan immediately. And 2, there weren't a lot of people in my life that would say like, oh, it's okay, or had an example of that happening. Again, I grew up in a really like impoverished area teen pregnancy was not uncommon. And there was this stigma and, standard path of, okay, if that happens, you're going to like live your minimum life and you stay around here. And it was just such an opposite of what I had wanted for myself, that like those first couple of months were really difficult, of me hearing that from my peers and from, mentors and family members and my parents of, I've ruined my life, and internalizing that, like as if like, yep, I had ruined my life, but I wanted to change it. I think that I wasn't prepared, like fully prepared to say like, gosh, I've done all this work. And I look around, this isn't the life that I want. So like something has to change.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a piece too, right? It's like, I think you have your own internal monologue of just that kind of, oh shit moment. Yep. And then it's like, then you start to create monologues for what other people are going to say. And then it starts to create this fear and this pressure. And, it's, I can only imagine you just start to kind of spiral from there. How did, when you shared it with family, with friends, with any mentors, how did they respond to that news? And even more so, I think even more important is, how did this impact the person that you are today?
Initial reactions were complete opposite of what would happen if I announced I was pregnant today. It was shock. Again, like there was, like, I don't say this in kind of like a haughty way, but at that time in that area and with my mom and I was like say class president, I was salutatorian. There was this anticipation that was outside of just me. It was my teachers, it was my counselors, my mom, my friends. There's this expected, oh, Sarah's going to do X, Y, Z. So when that happened, the response across the board was, wow, like, I can't believe you did this. Oh my gosh, you ruined your life. And again, just like you said, that was really, I did internalize it at one point. It was really internalized and suffered really bad depression from that. But I think what changed, I don't want to say if there was like one specific turning point, because there were a lot of little turning points across the way. I remember one thing specifically was before our graduation. I was really close to our counselor, and this is a really little, it seemed little at the time, and I look back, but she had shared with me, some parents had called because as class president, I was supposed to do the prayer at our graduation, and parents had called to like object to me doing that because, hey, I had a child and was, pregnant, and that didn't align with what they believed I should be, like someone like that should be standing up there. And I remember at the time thinking, no way in hell that has happened. That there are grown adults thinking that. I was like, I'm going to prove them wrong. That was one of the first ones. And I remember both my parents, loving parents, but again, they were just like heartbroken. And my dad had made a comment, something along the lines of like, gosh, I remember that we had such high expectations, and I just kept thinking, gosh, why would just this one, like, obviously having a child is such a major thing, but it doesn't mean that I'm bound for failure. So there were little things across the way, even through college, that happened that continue to just like to turn that dial of, you know what, I'm going to fight through. I don't care if it means that I have to work. I worked all through college. I don't care if it means it's late nights, if I'm failing classes. I've never failed before, but turning that around, it just developed this grit that I think I had the foundation of before, but it wasn't until this hard thing in life, having a child at 18, solidified of like this, it doesn't matter what comes my way. It doesn't matter what, like what people say, or if I don't fit the box of the mold of what success looks like. Screw that. I'll fight through it and prove everyone wrong. And now, like you're kind of get to the point of you asking about like, how does that change who I am today? A big piece of that is for my son. So my son's name was Riley, and like to show him like, look, this is it. It's important for me to teach him like the power of grit and the importance of like not letting other things and other people and even your actions and reactions like fully define you at that moment, because you could always push through and get something else that you want, or, drive toward whatever goal that you have.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think I feel like it's one of those things where those around you, it's like they don't know how to respond. And of course, when you're seeing these things of people that you love, you can't help to reflect your fears on them
Yeah.
and not even understanding. And it's like in that moment, how selfish that can be because this person needs light. They need love. They need grace. And I feel like sometimes people can lose that empathy and lose that feeling and just kind of push people to fall into these spirals and get even more depressed. But I
Yeah.
love hearing from you how it's like, yeah, screw that. I'm going to take this. I'm going to make something of myself. And it's like this formation of grit that just feels like started rumbling in your tummy and was like, not today, Satan, not today.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll also add, one of the other pieces of it, so interesting what you just shared about like, gosh, this pressure, right? This pressure that comes on. Something I've also realized recently with my son, he just started high school a couple of weeks ago, and high school was very, like, I look back, it's like PTSD, right? All this stuff had happened during that time. But I've caught myself, I think as parents, we all want the best for our children. And I look back and I can empathize with my parents at the time, that frustration and anger, and because there's been so much work to get me to a point of success. And I see the same with him, and I'm really mindful of what level of pressure am I giving space for him to make mistakes and supporting that, because that's difficult. That's still tough. Sometimes I'm like, gosh, maybe I was a little too hard. But I think that's another thing that it's impacted me as a mom and at work, right? Even as a manager of like people, like you can have high expectations, but people need to fail. Honestly, at times people need to fail and feel a little bit of support to do that, or else the pressure becomes way too difficult. And that can be, everyone will handle that differently.
Yeah, I love how you said that because it's one of those concepts of allowing people to fail forward. But I think it's also an opportunity, whether you're a parent or you're a leader, it's to lead forward as well and making sure that you have that safety net to capture either your child or your team. I feel like that in itself, that empowers people. That helps to propel them into the leader or whatever it is that they were supposed to be, who they are today. It helps to form that. And I think giving that grace and that love, it's like you need that grit to continue to push you. But oftentimes too, it's like we need to remind ourselves that as leaders, as parents, we also need to give the grace to continue to be that coach and inspire. So this is awesome. Continue to share with me. So you got this grit that's just rumbling in your belly, girl, and you graduate. What happens after graduation?
I kept going. It's, I think I shared early on, I was working all through college. So I didn't really get, like, my scholarships were taken away. I had a scholarship. I failed out as part of some of my classes, scholarships taken away. So I had to really foot the bill and be a parent and try to manage like daycare, all of these things at the same time. So I was working throughout college, and I had some odd and end little jobs here and there. I worked as merchandising at a grocery retailer one time, all kinds of stuff. But I think it was my my junior or senior year of college, I found my first, I like to say it like my first big girl role, which was sales. And at the time I was already on the path to get my major in business, but I didn't have like a focus in marketing or anything like that. And that's where I kind of had that grit of, okay, I need to work because I have to support myself and my son and be able to pay for college. But I also want to figure out, like, how do I hack this to make the most amount of money I can as early as possible to set myself up for success, just to be really honest. Like, that was a big piece. It's like, I don't have the luxury to do internships and to do overseas, assessment and all those things. I didn't have that luxury. So I was working through college, found that job, and sales is a gritty role, especially when you were doing outbound sales, cold calling, all of that. So I'd say I lucked up in this role that even though I had no experience with sales, that grit kind of not just carried me through college, but it directly applied to that role and the success with that role. My first year, I made it to President's Club, learned a lot. I had some amazing managers there, amazing coworkers. But ending college, while it was a great moment in my life, and I have a great picture, I'll send it to you after. I have a great picture of me like in my cap and gown and holding Riley. He was he was like 4 or 5 years old at the time. It wasn't that pivotal moment that I think in like a traditional sense of, okay, I've closed this chapter in my life. Now I need to open a new one. Like, honey, the chapters were going through the whole time. So this was just like another page in the book. So I continued working. I ended up, I will say about a year after graduating, and I was doing sales, and I realized, I love it. This isn't what I want to do forever. That selling marketing goods in a way, the digital marketing, doing websites, things like that. I really love that. I realized I love, like, in my free time, I would want to look through, like, how do you rank on the first page of Google, and how do you hack advertising, stuff like that. So I ended up going back to school online to get my MBA, and that kind of helped set this trajectory for being able to, start applying to roles and, just setting myself in a different light. But I finally felt like I was starting to catch up with other peers in this space. But I don't think there was ever like oh, great, that's finished. Even when I finished my MBA, it's like things keep going. Like there's no stopping. And I think when you have a kid, I'm sure you can relate, there's no stopping. You just don't stop. You have to keep going.
Well, and it's like one of those, it's like life's plans. And in some way we have the opportunity to control it, but it's not like somebody comes out with a rule book and says, these are the things that are going to happen for your life. And this is the play by play. It's kind of like, no, you really learn not just the grit of it, but it's like you start to become more resilient, and you start to utilize all these things and life experiences to just continue to play the game, and you just start getting savvier at playing it for yourself. And, the piece I was thinking through as you were saying that is like, how do you feel like with the experiences that you learned along the way, how did that start to shape? Because like you said, it's like, it wasn't like you were able to close a chapter. It's like all these new chapters keep coming up. How do you feel like that helped to shape your future aspirations and just your approach to life's challenges moving forward?
Yeah, on the aspiration side, I think a lot of those experiences between not just like having to build grit and juggle a lot of things at the same time, but I've been fortunate across the way too to have great people in my life, great mentors, great coworkers, and wonderful managers. But it's really helped me raise my hand to ask for, like, I've now have a tendency to ask for feedback, because so early in my life I never did. Like, I was just very much because I've made this failure, because like I'm doing great and then I was doing terrible. And in both situations, it's like, I'm going to just completely be like a bit of a hermit, because I totally know what I'm doing, or I have no idea what I'm doing, and I don't want to ask for help. But one of the areas of my career that I think it's helped like change the trajectory is being willing. It doesn't matter if I do feel like I know what I'm doing, or if I don't feel what I'm doing. There's probably somebody else out there that they either know more, or they at a minimum have a different perspective. Why not get it? What does it hurt to get it? And doing that's helped me get external perspectives on, hey, I'm actually, I do pretty good when I have a lot on my plate. And I actually have better success when I'm not stuck to just one task. So that's helped guide when I look at roles or have built teams, stuff like that, I know that I need a challenge. Then it's great for me that I've had that experience rolling the hard way, but I need that moving forward as well, of whatever role I'm in. I need to be able to be passionate about it, but it needs to be a challenge, and it can't be dull. It can't be doing the same thing over and over, or have a lot of predictability, because I thrive because I've grown in an area of like unpredictability and not knowing what's ahead and having multiple things. So that works well in startups and, like in these areas of growth. Like, thankfully, like that aligns well. So that's helped kind of guide me to, this is a little bit of my space, this demand gen B2B SaaS space. I do well with that. So that's from an aspiration standpoint. I think from a life standpoint and kind of pulling it outside of just my career, it's a little bit of the opposite in that I want to make sure, well, I always seem to have a lot going on. I try to be so intentional to have focus time on whether it's a family, whether it's me being able to have time to go to the gym, whether it's our home. Like I really have come to love predictability in my personal life and just a sense of ease and peace and calm. And I fight for that. Like I fight for peace and I fight for just comfort and calmness at home, because I think it's a little bit nuanced, but it just creates this environment that I want to create for my son and I want to have for a family. And it's this, that's not perfectness by any means, but a sense of just, you know what, I feel comfortable and I feel at peace in this place. So it's really driven, to be proactive in doing that, because again, I just didn't have that experience. I don't have a blueprint to go off of from my own childhood. So I've had to be intentional with trying to build that out. Like, what does it mean that we have a sit down family time? Like, what does that even look like? I'm on Pinterest and Google all the time looking at weird stuff like that. But just trying to be like intentional about like, how do I create peace and calm at home?
No, I love that. I love that, because I feel like through all the adversity that we tend to experience in our life, it's like you have options. Either you can sit and, have a pity party, and that's not really going to get you anywhere. And what I'm hearing from you, it's like all these empowering moves. One, soliciting feedback. I think the empowerment of getting feedback from your peers or the people that you value to help you become a better person is huge. I think more people should solicit feedback. I think the other piece of it, and what I'm hearing from you, is knowing thyself, knowing that you operate with all the resiliency that you've gone through. Continue to bring it on. I can handle it. So continue to bring it my way, because then that makes me even more scrappier to be built for a certain area of a type of business. And it's like that. It brings us back to that knowing thyself and being able to like get molded by the things that have happened in your life, not being hurt by them, but being empowered by the scars that have happened. The other piece I love that you mentioned, and it gives me, I'm a big JLo fan, so I'm like getting the goosies as I was thinking through
I
it.
love it.
is then being very intentional and creating a safe space with your home and nurturing those relationships and spending that time, because even going through, knowing the impact that it makes to then help the legacy of what you're building with you and your son, with you and your husband, your family. It's just so good. So good. So to wrap things up, in a world full of possibilities, what mark do you dream of leaving as a trailblazer for future generations of empowered women?
What mark? Gosh, I think there is a quote that I'm sure it's around a lot of places, but it really stuck out in a sermon that I'd listened to a couple years ago. But it was like along the lines of like, how are you turning your obstacles into opportunities? And I think as women, and whatever additional layers of minority or disadvantage you can add on top of that, whether it's by race or, like what you've been exposed to, poverty, anything like that, I think they're often the eyes of obstacle and they're the eyes of the opportunity. And creating that muscle to look at it as opportunity does not come overnight. And I think that's what I want to showcase, and what I'd like other women as well, and people in this world, just to be able to say, like, look, we all are going to have an obstacle, like, whether you call it growth mindset or whatever. It's like, how do you transition that into an opportunity and use that like to trick your mind or position your mind to attach it and to look at it in a different way? Because a lot of the things in my life, I think you can almost see two different storylines in my life. I often think of it, there's a storyline of a girl who grew up poor and was a teenage mom, and, just all these things here. And then there's another storyline of, hey, a person who, graduated top of her class and went to school and like was successful in her career. It's the same person. Like those obstacles, like those wins don't come without some of those other obstacles. So that would be my highest level, is like turn those obstacles into opportunities.
I love that. I love that. Don't let your adversity define your story, but figure out how to merge it and make a powerful kick-ass story from that.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Absolutely. And I'll end it with, you saying adversity kind of kicked off something. I have one tattoo and it says per aspera ad astra, and that's Latin for through adversity to the stars. And that is the theme of my life, I'd say, just like figure out, like, whatever that adversity is, like, keep going, keep moving forward, keep pushing it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Sarah, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing your vulnerable story with us. And as we wrap up today's episode, let's remember that supporting one another, we amplify our strengths and we break down barriers. So go out there, champion for your dreams, empower your peers, and continue to shape the future where every woman realizes her true potential. Until next time, see ya.